My father built our house with his own hands. Not as a metaphor. Not the way people say, we built a life here. I mean, he actually built it. Concrete. Wood. Nails. 3 years of evenings and weekends after his shift at the factory. I remember the smell of sawdust in the garage. The sound of his hammer echoing through the unfinished rooms. I remember sitting on a stack of drywall sheets while he worked, swinging my legs and asking questions he always answered patiently. That was the father I knew first. The one who carried me through the tall grass behind the house when I was too tired to walk. The one who ran beside my bicycle until I found my balance. The one who sat with me at the kitchen table doing math homework he barely understood but refused to give up on. Back then the house felt strong. Safe. Solid. Like the walls themselves knew we belonged there. Somewhere along the way that feeling disappeared. Not suddenly. Not in one dramatic moment. It faded slowly, like a photograph left too long in the sun. The factory closed first. After that, everything shifted. My father stopped waking up early. Then he stopped leaving the house. Then he started drinking. At first it was just a few beers in the evening. Then it was every evening. Then it was mornings too. The house he built started to feel different. Quieter. Heavier. My mother worked double shifts at a diner across town. She came home smelling like coffee and grease and exhaustion. But she still tried. She tried to keep things normal. She tried to keep him calm. She tried to keep me from noticing what was happening. But kids notice everything, even when they pretend they don't. By the time I was 16, the man living in that house barely resembled the father I remembered. He still sat at the dinner table, still asked how school was, but his eyes never stayed on me long. His attention drifted somewhere else, somewhere dark. I learned new rules without anyone explaining them. Speak softly. Move carefully. Don't argue. Don't give him a reason. I became very good at disappearing. Very good at making myself small. Most days that worked. Most days the house stayed quiet. But silence doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes silence is just the moment before something breaks. It happened on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were my mother's longest shifts. She worked until midnight, which meant that night it was just me and him in the house. I was in the kitchen doing homework when he came in. The television was already on in the living room. Some loud game show he watched every evening. The sink had one dish in it. Just one. I had meant to wash it after finishing my assignment. I never got the chance. His voice came from behind me. Sharp. Louder than it needed to be. Why is this still here? I turned slowly. It's just one plate, I said quietly. I was about to. He cut me off. His hand slammed against the counter. The sound filled the kitchen like a gunshot. And then the shouting started. I don't remember the exact words. Just the tone. Accusations that didn't make sense. Anger that didn't belong to that moment. It wasn't about the plate. It was about everything. The factory. The bills. The years he felt like the world had taken something from him. And somehow that anger found its way to me. His voice got closer. Louder. His hands moved. Then everything happened too fast. A chair knocked over. My shoulder hitting the wall. My hand caught under his boot as I tried to push myself up from the floor. Pain exploded through my fingers. For one frozen moment, the room went completely silent. He looked down at me, breathing hard, and in his eyes I saw something that terrified me even more than the anger. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear of himself. Like he had just realized what he had become. The moment passed quickly. He stepped back. Turned. Walked out the front door without saying a word. The door slammed. And the house he built with his own hands became the quietest place in the world. I stayed on the floor for a long time. My hand throbbed. My chest felt tight. I kept staring at the ceiling like if I stayed, still enough the moment might rewind. It didn't. Eventually I stood up. Slowly. The kitchen looked exactly the same as it had an hour earlier. The same table. The same chair. The same single plate in the sink. But everything felt different, like the house itself had shifted slightly off its foundation. I walked to the bathroom, looked at myself in the mirror. The girl staring back at me looked familiar, but something inside her had changed. Something permanent. I knew one thing with complete certainty. I couldn't stay there. Not another hour. Not another minute. I grabbed my phone, my keys, my jacket. I left the plate in the sink. I left the lights on. I walked out the door and got into my car. I drove without thinking, without planning where I was going. The roads were empty. The sky was still dark. Eventually, I pulled into a parking lot outside a 24-hour diner. The same diner where my mother worked. She wasn't there that night, but the lights were on. The sign hummed quietly. I turned off the engine and just sat there, the steering wheel cold under my hands, my phone resting in my lap, my mind spinning through possibilities. Call the police. Call my mother. Call a friend. Every option felt impossible. Calling the police would destroy everything. Calling my mother would only send her back into the same cycle of excuses and apologies. Calling a friend would mean explaining something I barely understood myself. So I sat there. Minutes passed, then hours. The parking lot stayed empty. The sky slowly turned gray. The sun started rising behind the diner roof. And my phone stayed in my hand. One name kept staring back at me from my contacts list. My uncle. My father's younger brother. The one person in the family who had always been steady. Kind. Different. He lived 6 hours away. We barely saw him. But I remembered something he told me years ago. At a family barbecue. I must have been 10. He knelt beside me while everyone else talked around us. And he said something quietly. If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me. No questions asked. At the time it sounded like something adults say to children. Something polite. Something temporary. But sitting in that parking lot with the sun rising and my hand still aching, the memory felt different. It felt real. I stared at his name on the screen. My thumb hovered over the call button. I never thought I would make this call. Not in a million years. But after what happened that night, I had no choice. I pressed dial. The phone rang once, twice. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear it. Then the line clicked. Hello. His voice was thick with sleep, but alert at the same time. The kind of alert that comes from someone who has spent a lifetime ready to help. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words sat somewhere in my chest, tangled up with everything else. Hello, he said again. Then his tone softened. Who is this? It's me. My voice cracked. It's your niece. There was a pause. Not long. Just long enough for him to wake up completely. What's wrong? Simple words. But something about the way he asked them made it impossible to pretend. I tried to answer. Nothing came out. My throat tightened. I can hear you breathing, he said gently. Take your time. I'm right here. That was all it took. The story came out in pieces. Broken sentences. Long pauses. I didn't tell him everything. I didn't describe the moment in the kitchen. I didn't explain the pain in my hand. I just said enough. Enough for him to understand that something had happened. Enough for him to know I needed help. Enough for him to realize I wasn't safe going back home. He didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, the silence on the line felt steady instead of empty. Then he asked one question. Where are you? I told him the name of the diner, the street, the town. He repeated it quietly, like he was fixing it in his mind. Okay, he said. His voice had changed. Not louder, just more certain. Stay there. I blinked. What? Stay exactly where you are, he said. I'm coming. You don't have to. I'm already getting dressed. His tone left no room for argument. You're safe there, right? I looked around the empty parking lot. The diner lights glowed softly. A delivery truck passed on the road. Yes, I said. Good. A pause. Then he said something that made my chest tighten. You did the right thing calling. The line went quiet. The call ended. And for the first time since the night began, I didn't feel completely alone. 6 hours is a long time when you're waiting. At first, I stayed in the car, watching the parking lot, watching the sun climb higher. Eventually, I went inside the diner, ordered coffee I barely touched. The waitress asked if I was okay. I nodded. People do that. They nod when they don't have the energy to explain. Time moved strangely that morning. Too slow, too fast. At some point, I went back outside, sat on the hood of my car, waited, and then I saw the truck. Old, dark blue, pulling slowly into the lot. I recognized it immediately. My uncle stepped out. He looked exactly the way I remembered. Broad shoulders, gray starting to show in his beard. The same steady presence that had always made family gatherings feel calmer. He walked toward me without rushing, without hesitation. When he reached me, he stopped. He looked at my face, then at my hand, then back at my eyes. He didn't ask questions. He didn't say anything dramatic. He just pulled me into a hug, the kind of hug that doesn't rush, the kind that says everything without words. I hadn't realized how much I needed that until that moment. "Come on," he said quietly after a while. "Let's go." I didn't ask where. I didn't need to. I climbed into the passenger seat of his truck. We left the parking lot together. The road stretched out in front of us, 6 hours away from everything I had known. The drive was quiet, not uncomfortable, just calm. He asked if I wanted food. I said no. He asked if I wanted to sleep. I said I couldn't. So we drove. Fields rolled past the windows. Small towns, gas stations, long highways cutting through open land. Sometimes silence is the best kind of kindness. His house stood at the end of a gravel road. White siding, wide porch, tall trees surrounding it. When we pulled into the driveway, a woman stepped outside. His wife. She walked down the steps and wrapped her arms around me before I could even say hello. "You're safe here," she said softly. 3 words, but they felt heavier than anything I had heard all night. Inside, a bedroom waited. Fresh sheets, a lamp glowing warmly, a glass of water on the nightstand. No questions, no pressure, just space. I stayed there for 3 weeks. During that time, my uncle made phone calls. Quiet conversations behind closed doors. Long talks at the kitchen table after he thought I had gone to sleep. I never asked what he said, but I knew he spoke to my mother. And eventually, I knew he spoke to my father. One evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table. The sun was setting through the window. The air smelled like coffee and rain. "There's something you should know," he said gently. I waited. "Your father needs help," he continued. "Real help." I stared at the table. "He's been sick for a long time," my uncle said. "Not the kind of sickness people can see easily, but it's there. Is he getting help?" I asked quietly. "He will." The certainty in his voice surprised me. He didn't want to at first, my uncle admitted. But he understands now. "What changed?" My uncle looked at me carefully. "You did." I frowned slightly. "I didn't do anything. You made the call." He leaned back in his chair, and that call forced the truth into the open. I didn't know what to say to that. "He told me he's ashamed," my uncle added after a moment. He said he's sorry. The word hung in the air. Sorry. Such a small word. For something that had changed everything. "I don't know what that means to you right now," my uncle said gently. "And you don't have to decide." "Decide what?" "If you ever want to see him again." He folded his hands calmly. "That choice is yours." The kitchen stayed quiet. The clock ticked softly on the wall. And for the first time in my life, someone had given me control over what happened next. I didn't go back. That decision surprised some people. But to me it felt simple. Not easy. Just clear. The house my father built was still standing. The walls were still there. The porch. The kitchen table. The cornfields behind it. But something inside that house had broken. And I knew I couldn't step back into it and pretend it hadn't. So I stayed with my uncle a little longer. Long enough for my hand to heal. Long enough for the shaking inside me to settle. Long enough to realize something important. I wasn't trapped anymore. After a month, I moved into a small apartment near a community college. It wasn't much. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a window that looked out over a parking lot. But when I closed the door that first night, the silence felt different. Peaceful, not tense. I enrolled in classes, worked evenings at a bookstore, started building a life piece by piece. No one shouted. No one slammed doors. No one watched me like I might break something by existing. For the first time, I felt space around my life. My mother called sometimes. At first, the conversations were careful. We talked about school, about work, about small things. The real topics stayed unspoken between us. But slowly that changed. She told me my father was in therapy every week. She said he didn't miss appointments, even when it was hard. Even when it meant facing things he had ignored for years. She said he was quieter now, softer, more like the man she married. I didn't know what to do with that information. Part of me wanted to believe it. Another part of me stayed cautious. Time passed. Months became years. I finished community college, transferred to a university, graduated with honors, found a job, then another, built a career that felt steady and real. Friends came into my life. Some stayed, some didn't. That's how life works. But the one constant through everything was the choice I made that morning in the diner parking lot. The call. My uncle called me on my 25th birthday. We talked about ordinary things at first. Work, weather, family updates. Then, near the end of the conversation, he said something I've never forgotten. "You know that call you made," he said. "The one you thought would break everything?" I leaned back in my chair. "Yeah." "It didn't just save you," he said quietly. "It saved your father too." I didn't answer right away. "How?" I finally asked. "He was heading toward a place he couldn't come back from," my uncle said. "Anger, alcohol, isolation." He paused. That call forced him to face it. I stared at the window. He had a choice after that, my uncle continued. Keep going the way he was going, or change. And he chose to change? Yes. Another pause. He's still working on it. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. I never called to save my father. I called because I needed help, because I needed to survive. But maybe something unexpected happened along the way. Maybe saving myself gave him a chance to face himself. I don't know if we'll ever rebuild the relationship we once had. Some things don't return the way they were. Some doors stay closed. And that's okay. Life continued. Work grew busier. Responsibilities increased. I moved to a better apartment, bought my own car. The small, quiet life I built slowly became something strong, stable, real. One afternoon, years later, I checked my mailbox. Among the bills and advertisements was a simple envelope, handwritten, no return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it for a long time. 3 days passed before I opened it. Inside was a single letter. Dear one. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I'm not writing to explain or excuse what I did. There are no explanations that would make it right. I just need you to know something. You were never the problem. I was. I was lost in ways I didn't understand. Angry in ways I couldn't control. And you were the one who paid for that. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a reply. But I want you to know I'm proud of you. I always was, even when I couldn't say it. I watched from a distance as you built your life. And I thought, she did that. She did it without me, despite me. That takes strength, more than I ever had. Be well. Be happy. That's all I ever wanted for you. Dad. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer beside my bed. I haven't written back. Maybe someday I will. Maybe I won't. Some relationships heal slowly. Some never return. But the letter still matters, because it reminds me of something important. The call I made that morning, the one I never thought I'd make, changed everything. It gave me distance. It gave me safety. It gave me the space to become someone new, someone stronger, someone who didn't have to shrink to survive. I'm not the girl who sat in that parking lot anymore. I'm not invisible. I'm not afraid. I'm someone who made the hardest call of her life and found her future on the other side of it.